and the defeat of all the hate and all the darkness and all the evil and all the enemies of Eden. Should have his Galsa Mashiach taking me at Mamish.
Amen.
Lamnat Sayach Mizmar L'David. Yancha Adonai b'yom tzara yisagev Hashem Elohei Yaakov. Yishlach ezecha mikodesh u'mitzin yisadeka. Yizkar kol men chesecha v'aylascha yidashne sela. Iten lecha chil vavecha v'chol atzascha yimalid. Merana v'shuasecha v'shem Eloheinu nidgel. Yimali Adonai kol mishalesecha. Ata yadaiti. Ki Yeshia Adonai Mashiachai Yarnei Umashmei Kodshei Bigvuris Yesha Yiminei Eile Barechev Eile Basusim V'nachnu B'Shem Adonai Eloheinu Nazki Heima Korov V'Nafalu V'nachnu Kamnu V'Nasoydod Adonai Yeshia Melech Yarneinu V'Yem Kareinu. Okay. So in Ois Dalin that we learned yesterday, so please everybody have your ears open. If you hear anybody ringing, buzzing in, so we'll buzz them back. Buzz for a buzz, okay. That is different kinds of netzutzes that we have to elevate. There's the netzutzes that are found within objects and articles, whether it be food, whether it be clothing, whether it be a certain place, whether it's inanimate, whether it's plant, whether it's animals. Everything in the world has a godly spark in it, and it needs to be elevated. And then there's also a godly spark that's found and invested in a nisayon, in a test. And the difference is, up until now, he said the difference was the source, where it's coming from. That this nitzutz alaki that's in a nisayon is coming from a much, much higher place, a much greater spiritual source. And that's why we see that it fell so much lower, because the higher up it is, the lower it falls. And the nisayon is lower than the sparks and everything else, because the nisayon is aggressively fighting godliness. Nisayon means something which is a force that I have to fight with. That's either trying to get me to do, pull me to do something I'm not allowed to do, or a force and a situation which is pushing me not to do that which I'm obligated to do according to Hashem. Now in this Ois Dalet, it goes into the difference how you elevate the spark. In order to understand the difference how to elevate the spark, we have to understand that there's another difference. And the difference is that the spark alaki, the nitzutz alaki that's found in objects and articles, this nitzutz alaki has a certain substance. And the way to elevate it is by me engaging with that object, but engaging the right way. So if it's food, it means making a bracha before, making a bracha after, eating it in a refined way. If it's clothing, it means buying clothing that are decent, clothing that are tznius. In the days where they used to make a bracha, people would make a bracha on new clothing. We don't make that bracha, but we make a different bracha. Every morning we thank Hashem for giving us clothing, malbish harumim. And the same is with everything else we do. From have furniture in the house, the table is used for Shabbos meals, is used for kosher food, the pots and pans, the kitchen. Wherever we are, there's always something connected to Yiddishkeit, to Torah, to mitzvahs. And by engaging with that object in a way that's consistent with the direction of Torah and Hashem, it becomes elevated. And the sign is different. And the sign doesn't really have any substance. The word nisayon and the essence of a nisayon, by definition, is something which appears to be in my way, something which I perceive it that way. It's deceptive. It projects itself as if it really gets in my way, And I have to recognize that it's in absolute truth. It's only a deception. It's not really true. And when I say deception, it doesn't mean that something is a figment of my imagination. Like the example we gave yesterday. A person comes from Europe, looks for a job, and they tell him, if you keep Shabbos, we're not going to hire you. And he goes from one interview to another interview to another interview, and every single place tells him the same thing. If you want to rest on Shabbos, we can't hire you. You're not going to be able to work here. So that's not a figment of imagination. The factory is a real factory, and the person who interviewed him is a real person, not a figment of anyone's imagination. And what he's saying is very real. So what's not real? This perception that if I will not work on Shabbos, I won't be able to survive, I won't be able to provide for my family, that is an asayan, and that's not true. That's a thought in my head. That's the impression I have. That is a deception. It looks very real. It feels like it's real, but it's not real. So what do I do? Because it's not real, my avoid is not to work with it and sort of enhance it, make it right. There's nothing to do, nothing to make. What I need to do is basically recognize that it's not real and dismiss this notion that I can't keep Shabbos if I want to be alive. So that's the difference. The godly spark in other things I have to elevate. The godly spark in this I have to ignore. And I have to not pay any attention to it. Basically not give it substance. And if I don't give it substance, it won't have any substance and it won't get in my way. Now we know that this is something which is also very practical, sometimes dealing with either people, sometimes dealing with children, and some of the things that they do, that there's some things in some situations we have to sit down and you recognize that whatever issue there is and work it out with them. And sometimes it's something that if it's ignored, it'll just disappear and go away. So obviously, the reason why that's the approach, because it has no substance in the first place. And in fact, the more you deal with it, even if you deal with it in a way to get rid of it, but if you're dealing with it, you're giving it substance. And if you give it substance, you're inflating it, you're making it bigger. If you don't give it substance, it gets smaller. If you don't give it any substance, it's gone, it disappears. Then the last line, he said, look at the last line of Eis Dalet, and how does a person do this? Because an asayin is something very difficult. It's not just something sitting there that's not kosher. An asayin is when there is an attraction, when there's a force pulling me or pushing me in one of the directions. In other words, let's say somebody wants to do an aveira. It means there's a force that's pulling me to do the aveira. Person has thoughts which are against Torah, thoughts of Avodah Zarah or other kind of thoughts. There's something inside and we find it very difficult to get out of my head. So it's a force that's pushing. And every Nisayan, especially in Nisayan in those days in Russia, that the Frierdiker Rebbe was dealing with at the time that he said this Maimer, which is that there's a government that is persecuting Yidden, arresting people, and basically threatening, and not only threatening, but actually doing it, that if someone was caught teaching Torah to children or organizing anything that had to do with Torah mitzvahs, Rahman al-Islam, they were shot, they were put into jail, they were sent to Siberia. So it wasn't a figment of imagination. But the fact that this should stop me from doing what I do in terms of Yiddishkeit, it's a very difficult thing. To overcome this and to recognize that it's not real and don't give it any substance, a person has to, in order to do, you have to draw out of ourselves something, a certain strength and a certain kayach that is indestructible. And that is the Nekudas Hayad, is the Pintal Yid. By the Me'er, these are the last two lines. Unless in the next one he'll talk about it more. person has to arouse, has to wake up and bring out of himself a hidden potential, a potential that's so deep, it's rooted into the essence of the soul. We know that in the soul, there are many different levels. There's the intellect, there's the emotion. In the intellect, there's Chokhmah, Bina, and Das. In Chokhmah, there are various levels. In Bina, there are various levels. In the emotions, there are various levels. But the level of all levels and the source of all sources in the soul is the etzem, the essence of the soul. This kayach comes from the essence of the soul, which is called Nekudas Hayadus. In Yiddish, it's called the Pintel Yid, which means it's a dot, meaning to say, when you talk about the essence, it's a dot. It's not something. It's the source, the nucleus of everything that goes on in the neshama. So this is the essence of the soul. That's the part of the soul that always remains connected to Hashem. To stand up strong against all the things that are preventing us, blocking us, that are fighting with us. In fact, we'll learn a little bit later that on the contrary, dafka, those things that are blocking and those things that are fighting with us, they actually draw it out of me. Just as we spoke about in the beginning of the Maimon, when a person is challenged, it accesses, it stimulates something deep in me to overcome the challenge. Like the Gemara says, even in simple things, that famous quote that I learned a lot from my teachers, I learned a lot from my colleagues, but the most wisdom I've gained is from my students, because the students ask questions and they challenge the teacher, and because of that, the brain is forced to go deeper into its potential and bring out more depth of the potential of the mind. And now I understand the subject so much deeper than I would have understood it without those challenges. So on every level, intellectual, emotional, even physical, when a person is challenged, hidden potential rises to the surface. So when there's really a big nesayah, the essence of the neshama sort of wakes up. And that gives me the kayach to overcome this test. In a way that, not that I'm dealing with it, but that I'm able to not give it any substance and just do what I have to do. Yeah.
Someone downstairs that needs to fix the roof.
Yeah.
And they don't know where to go. And no one's downstairs.
Okay, questions. They don't know how to get to the roof. Do I know how to get to the roof?
They said that they have to go up through this building to get to the roof. I saw it one time.
I think they go through this room. Okay, you want to tell them to come up?
Yeah.
Might be another way, but one of the ways is the window.
That's how they went up.
See, go straight to the top.
I think in the Mishpia room, the window closest to the teacher's desk, out the window, I think there's a ladder to the roof.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah.
I hope it is. That's what you
They came to learn Chassidus. You just go right. One of them, the other day was I don't know. One time I was in that room back there, and they were like, "Sorry, we need to go to the roof." And they came in and went through the window.
You got through that window, right?
Yeah. I think it would have been funnier though if somebody come off the roof and we were.
That's true. Not going to
I just want to say something related to current events. That when you go out of the room, if they can have the bracha, that this is what's happening today. In fact, I was thinking of maybe learning a mimer with a mimer of the Rebbe, mimer of the Friedrich Rebbe, which more or less describes what's going on with the words that before Mashiach comes, there'll be a big shofar blowing and it's going to shake up the whole entire world. And after that, we're going to see that Hashem is going to call to every Yid and say, come home. The words in the pasuk is that on that day, Hashem will blow. That day means at the end of Golus, Hashem will blow a big shofar. And all the people that are lost here and there and everywhere will come back to Yerushalayim. Basically, it means not just lost geographically speaking, they're in different countries. It means lost to Yiddishkeit, they come back. What's happening now, and you can see this online, wherever you look, you'll see this is something phenomenal that's going on, that Yidden are turning to Yidden. I just want to give you an example of what we're talking about. This guy is a famous leftist journalist, I think, and this is what he writes. In other words, he made this public. This is not something that confidential that we found out. He writes, as part of my soul searching, and what I thought in the past and think differently today, only two words come to mind, two words that I refuse to say. What are the two words? I'm Jewish. Wow, how I hated those two words. At every lecture abroad, I would say, I'm Israeli. And if someone asked me about my Jewishness, I would say, I'm not. That I was born Jewish, but there's absolutely nothing Jewish about me. In the past week, this answer pierces my soul and leaves me no rest. I grew up in a home where there was contempt for Judaism. And even without that, I think I just didn't want to believe that I was that kid with the casquette. It's other little caps that they wear, like he thought of himself like. And I wanted to believe that I was a great man of the world, an author, a journalist, a screenwriter. My Judaism is not part of my identity. It's not even my Tzu'udah Zehut. It's not in my ID card. I was wrong about that too. I may not be the kid with the kashket, but I'm a Jewish. And for the first time in my life, I realized that no matter how hard I try, I can't escape it. And for the first time in my life, I realized that I also don't want to escape it. I'm proud of my Judaism. I'm ashamed that I denied it. I won't start walking around with a kippah now, nor do I think you'll see me in shul, or in yeshiva for that matter, but I'll seek my Judaism. I'll seek my God. I'll seek the identity that so many years and errors have threatened to destroy, and that I mistakenly almost obliterated with my own hands. Today, I lit candles with my children, the first time in my life. We didn't know what bracha to make, so I made the Hanukkah brachas.
So nice.
And I davened for the hostages, for the soldiers. For us, I don't think if I'll do this every week, I don't know where this journey will take me. I do know I am Omar Barak, author, journalist, screenwriter, Israeli, and a Jew. We know what this is. This is what the Mimer is talking about. This is what the Mimer is talking about. There comes a time where that dot comes out, the essence comes out. Imagine a person, not only he, his parents trained them, they had contempt for Judaism. And what brought it out? I think this, what happened, could have brought out the opposite. Look what God is doing. And the answer is this is something spiritual, and it's related to Mashiach. And the Rebbe said that every Yid has a spark of Mashiach in him. And when the spark of Mashiach in every Jew comes to the forefront, that's when Mashiach himself will come to the forefront. And basically, these are the sparks of Mashiach and Yidden that are now becoming revealed. And that's that's preceding the Hizgalas of Mashiach himself, as we'll soon see. By the way, this is just one story. If you go online, it doesn't end. It does not end. There's another guy, this video of him. He has tattoos from the tip of his nose to his whole entire body. No connection to Judaism, and nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I saw that.
I saw that. And unbelievable words that are coming out of these people's mouths. It's not even their words. The neshama is just pouring out. V'hine, ois hey. So in normal times, when Yidden were davening and learning and doing mitzvahs and things were in a normal way, in those days, even though the neshama was sort of flourishing and the neshama was bubbling with excitement, but the essence didn't really come out. That doesn't come out in normal circumstances. And here it came out, and because there's an asayin. So this nekudas hayadus shenimtza omek, it's found deep, believe Kol Yisrael, in the heart of every Jew. Ubekayach izus gevuras nekudas levava izu, with the absolute power and strength of the heart. Yachol ulamit chazak, if he brings this out, he can stand up strong. B'chol teikav oiz, v'neged kol meineo ma'akev, against anything that's blocking and anything that's standing in the way. In the way of what? Page 198. In the way of Lilmei Torah, learning Torah be Mekayim mitzvahs. Ulizgaber al nisayin, and to overcome the test. The Yilmei Torah, overcome the test means to teach Torah, Mekayim mitzvahs, to observe the mitzvahs, Mimbli lasum lev klal, and not to give any attention. Don't pay attention to the things that are blocking and the things that are preventing me. Don't give it substance. Klal or klal. You know, the Frierdiker Rebbe and every Rebbe, whatever they taught, they themselves naturally did. There's a famous medrash. The medrash is on a pasuk. We say it in davening, and every kid in Lubavitch knows this medrash. Why? Because every boy, when he becomes bar mitzvah, says a maimer. And this medrash is in the maimer. It's in Tillim, but it's also in the davening after Ashrei. In Tillim, it's chapter Kuf Mem Zayin, 147. And it's one of the Halulukas. And the last line says like this, Magid Dvarav Yaakov, Hashem gives his words to Yaakov, Chukav Mishpatav, all his rules and laws, he gives them to the Yisrael, to the Jewish people. But he didn't do this to any other nation. So the Medrash says, a king usually tells people what to do, but he himself doesn't necessarily do that. He tells other people to do this, that, and the other thing, but he doesn't stick to it. He's the king, he doesn't have to do it. Hashem, whatever he himself does, that's what he tells us to do. And it goes on to say that just like he tells us to put on tefillin, Hashem puts on tefillin. So it means all the mitzvahs Hashem does himself. Of course, Hashem doesn't have a physical hand and doesn't put on physical tefillin, but obviously it means once we understand what is the spiritual meaning of tefillin, we can understand how this can take place on a higher spiritual plane. That's part of what the Maimer talks about. So we know that tzaddikim follow the path of their creator. And tzaddikim also the same thing. When they tell us to do something, they do it themselves. Not only they also do it themselves, they do it themselves first. And by them doing it, they break the barriers and they pave a path that makes us and enables us to do that. Like we say about Avraham Avinu, that he had Mesiras Nefesh. And by him having Mesiras Nefesh, he paved the way and enabled all of the Yidden throughout all the generations to have Mesiras Nefesh as well. So the Frierdiker Rebbe, this is what he had. He was in the times in Russia when the communists, took over. And not only communists, but the Jewish communists, which we called Yevseksia. And they were the ones that fought with a passion to uproot any trace of Torah, true Judaism. They closed down every single shul that they can. They closed down every yeshiva that they can. They closed down every cheder, every mikveh, anything that had to do with Yiddishkeit, they tried to destroy it and uproot. The Frierdiker Rebbe ran an underground operation under their noses all over the country. In recent years, they found documents that he had 600 places where people were learning Torah underground. Try to imagine, in a time where people were arrested, were shot, were executed for doing these kind of things. So when the Frierdiker Rebbe was arrested, he said he made a hachlota. I guess this is the principle of this mimer. He made there was a place where he was arrested. It was called Shpalerka. This was in, I guess what was called then Leningrad. Today it's called Petersburg. And this was a place that everybody knew that they torture you to death there. And people were petrified even to walk blocks near this place. And that's where they took the Frierdiker Rebbe. And we know Rahman Athani was tortured. And we know that the Frierdiker Rebbe, for the rest of his life, suffered physically. When he came to America, you see him in a wheelchair. He was only 60 years old, very young. Rahman al-Islan, it was a horrible experience. We don't even know just a little bit of what he shared. But he said that he went in with the achlata. They are nothing, and I'm not going to be intimidated by them, and I'm not giving them any substance. And expressed itself in ways which we don't know, but some of it he shared with us. What?
So there are three things that we know that we have to give up our life for. But as far as putting ourselves in danger for something that we, to learn Torah, in a secret way, if we're in a time of war, are we allowed to? Are we supposed to put ourselves in that? The tzaddikim, I understand. I'm saying like a simple need.
So you're right. There is first of all, there's a discussion amongst halachic authorities whether the person's allowed to give up the life or something like that, or on the contrary, they're not allowed to. They have to do everything to live. And then there's a different discussion that all depends. Let's say for a person is sick, and the doctor said the only way you could live is to eat this food, which is treif. You're not allowed to. Here the issue is a little bit different because it's a time which is called Gezeres HaMalchus, when there is a government that is trying to uproot Yiddishkeit. And this is a matter of what you're going to do is either going to be a defeat for Yiddishkeit or it's going to be a victory for Yiddishkeit. It takes on a whole different level. Because by giving in, you're basically empowering these forces to uproot Yiddishkeit. Even if it's not one of the three things. And that's why it's in a different category. And it's true, Api Halacha, there probably wouldn't have been an obligation to do it. But nevertheless, that's what saved Yiddishkeit in Russia. As we look back now, we see this is what overcame, this was the force that broke them. When he was released from jail, they weren't the same that they were before. It broke their strength, it broke their spirit. And there are a lot of details which we can't talk about now because I don't want to get lost on a detour. We have to go back on the highway. And the point I want to bring out was that what did he do as an example? First of all, these were Yidden. So when they spoke to him, he answered them in Yiddish. They were furious because they don't want to, they're Russians. They're not Yiddish. He spoke to them in Yiddish. And then, for example, they asked him, and they're filling out they told him to fill out a form. He said, I didn't come here. You brought me here. You know who I am. So you fill out the form. I mean, such answers. And every time the secretary would look up and say, do you know where you are? He said, I know where I am. At one point, when they asked him, do you know where you are? Because they said it numerous times. I'm in a place that's potter from a mezuzah, like a toilet and a horse's stable. This was his answer. And the Rebbe wants to give a whole sikha why he said this. And when they said to him, for example, how old are you? He said 150-something years old. She said, excuse me, well, this is not a place to joke around. I said, I'm not joking. I'm not here as an individual. I'm here as a continuation of my father and my grandfather, my great-grandfather, up until the Alter Rebbe, and we are 150-something years old. I mean, I'm saying it as it is. That's the way he spoke. Everything. And the point was, no one's interested in getting them angry. The point was, you have no substance. And again, that's something for a Rebbe. I can't see an ordinary person being anywhere near that. We have a different kind of test, not to get angry when I can't remember where I put down my pen. Okay, so don't give it any substance. These are the tests we deal with. Here in America, the Rebbe instituted that every Yontif we should go to other neighborhoods. We go to Borough Park, we go to Flatbush, we go even further to give over sichas and add simcha. So it's called the tahalucha. Some of you know this, those who've been around a little bit longer. Tahalucha means it's a march. And almost every time there's a tahalucha, there's also a rain. And sometimes we're zeiche that it's a torrential rain, not just a rain. But I remember when those people were still around, unfortunately, we don't have too many people like that. A lot of the older Chassidim from Russia were around, and they would say, now we're going to see the Mesiras Nefesh of the Amerikaner Chokoladnikas, which means the Americans raised on chocolate bars. They're going to walk in a rain. Could you imagine? This guy was sitting in jail 10 years. He was sitting in jail 5 years. He was in Siberia. The Americans, they're going to walk in a rain. So there are different levels of Mesiras Nefesh. But the main thing is, don't give it any substance. If you don't give it any substance, it doesn't have any substance. It only has substance because I'm giving it substance.
Rabbi,
Yes.
you're not allowed, like the doctor says, if you don't eat this trait, you'll die. You're not allowed to eat the trait?
No, the opposite. You're not allowed to not eat.
Okay, misunderstood. Okay.
You're not allowed to say, I want to be extra frum and not eat. That's not extra frum. That's going against Torah.
Okay.
The person has to do everything to protect their health. Yeah. And people who are being very cautious with these halachas in a case where it does damage to their health don't realize, but they're actually going against Torah. Because we can't compare this to the spark that's in other Gashmis. They got articles. Those are things that tzrichim levareh the aveda. They have to be elevated through aveda. Avokan abirur aydei tchiyah dafka. Here you have to just push it away. You have to ignore it and dismiss it, and there's nothing to talk about. I want to say it's also relevant to what's going on. We all know the Rebbe's opinion about Israel and about what's going on with the terrorists from the start. I mean, anyone who's really honest would look back now, should look back and say there's really nobody in the world that is a true understanding and vision and leadership like the Rebbe. From the beginning, the Rebbe said the same thing, had not changed. With terrorists, you do not negotiate. You don't even sit down by the table. There's nothing that's going back. Nothing. Because as soon as you say, okay, let's sit down and talk, means, okay, there's room to talk about it. To them, it means if we put enough pressure on, we'll get what we want. Especially if you chas v'shalom give back, they see that the pressure helped, they're going to pressure more. And you look back in history, anybody who wants to be honest, will look back at the dates, the timeline. We gave this back, it was more terrorism. Gave that back, even more terrorism. And Gush Kativ, Gaza is the biggest proof. They gave back this huge piece of land. They took out 10,000 Jewish families, uprooted them from their homes, sent them to places where they had no place where to go. A lot of people to this day are still not settled. And all this was done with the absolute certainty that if we're going to be so kind and so nice and show them how much we are ready to cooperate, it's going to be great. Since then, we've had 5, I think, wars already with Hamas and all these different people. And now the worst of the worst happened. And it's all a result of giving them this. And the one who's the head of Hamas, the leader of Hamas, is a man that was in Israel's jail for 20 years because he was a terrorist. And then again, to show the kindness of their hearts, they allowed him to go free for a certain deal that he made. And he's the head of this whole movement that's now, Rahman Aslan, killed, and in such a savage way, so many thousands of people. So basically, what the Rebbe is saying is, the Rebbe is the kindest person on planet. The Rebbe, we always find the positive in everything and in everybody. And over here, the Rebbe is saying, don't even talk to them, don't pay that, because it's a different situation. There's a different situation, and there is a time where the only way you can get rid of the opposing force is dismiss it. Tell them there is just nothing to talk about, it has no substance. And if they know that it has no substance, it'll all fall apart. If you give it substance, you're actually strengthening it. So this is the same on a personal level. My thoughts, my feelings, things and people outside of me, if I don't give it substance, it won't have any substance. But he explains now how. I know there's Gabras being on the soyan. The way to overpower the soyan, that to be able to overcome it. It's not just by learning and davening and thinking about it and meditating on it. This has to come from a different place. Has to come from that inner, deeper essence of the soul, showing is galus etzem hayechida. This is the etzem hayechida, which I said before, the spark of Mashiach in me has to be revealed. And I guess just like Mashiach in general brings redemption, that's how this spark of Mashiach will bring me redemption on a personal level. With vekusa shall nefesh belakus. So that means there are other things that the way to approach it is with the mayach. Let's say someone asks a question. I don't understand why this is this way. You sit down and you explain that the reason why the Torah says this or the Torah says that is because of this reason or that reason. And we give a good reason, that would make sense, and I feel better about it. Or someone is upset emotionally about something, and I meditate on Hashem, and I learn how I develop a feeling of love for Torah, for mitzvahs, for Hashem. This is working with my intellect, working with my emotions. Over here, intellect and emotion do not have the strength to overcome this nisayon. The only way to overcome the nisayon is bringing out the essence, which means if I have a nisayon and I start negotiating, just like with the Arabs, if you're going to start negotiating, you're not going to get there, because negotiating means you're giving it substance. Once I'm giving it substance, I'm in trouble. So the Avodah is, it's not about understanding more, it's not about feeling more, it's about being strong, standing strong with what I need to do in actuality. For example, if it's something about learning or davening, I stand strong that I'm going to learn. I have a shir, I have a time to daven. I'm not going to let things, so a person, for example, wants to daven, and then he says to himself, but if I daven today, I'm going to come late to work, I'm not going to make so much money, my business, I might lose out. So you start explaining to yourself, no, it won't lose out because of this, but once you start explaining to yourself, you're in trouble. You're giving substance. You just say, this is an assignment, just daven, just learn, just do what it is that you have to do. And by doing that, you're basically sending a message to that, whatever it is that's disturbing you, and saying, I am not recognizing you. I don't give you any substance. Goodbye and good riddance. By the way, don't even say goodbye. That's also giving substance. In other words, loy b'derech milchama, it's not unaware that there's a war and a confrontation with this nisayon. Loy b'derech taina maina. There's no taina maina, which means a dialogue with this nisayon, but just do what has to be done. Lilmaid or the spala or the snag b'darkei Torah mitzvah. Just do what has to be done, and do it with the greatest force. The force that comes from the essence of the soul, without any kind of dialogue, without any kind of questions and answers in my head, because that is giving it substance. So the way to approach it is just by dismissing. That's the only way you can truly overcome the nisayon. Okay, I guess we'll stop here. To be continued. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Majeski.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh no, I'm still going to be teaching that class. The truth is, you can hold it, but I think Shira should be here by now. So yeah, you're right. You can give it to them. No, hold on. She might work.